Well, here we are at the start of a new year, and there's no better way to kick it off than by diving into a fun and super easy quilt project. And this one is perfect for beginners. Now this quilt makes a nice cozy lap quilt, or you can change up the fabrics and make a cute baby quilt. And with our easy strip method, this is going to be super fast to make. Now the fabric we are using was sent to us from Cotton Cuts, and this is from the Folk and Law range by Fancy That Design & Co. for Moda. However, as you may notice, the fabric card included in this box features a different collection, suggesting that the wrong card was accidentally packed. However, these things happen. As always, working with Moda fabric is a pleasure, as they make such high quality fabrics. Cotton Cuts offers a membership service that delivers premium fabric right to your doorstep on a regular basis. Now you can customise the frequency of your shipments and select fabric colourways and patterns that match your personal style. Now this particular pack from Cotton Cuts includes 3 yards of gorgeous fabric, a matching spool of Aurifil thread, a pencil with the whimsical quote, "I've got a quiltitude." Now I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested in exploring the Cotton Cuts subscription service. Now there are 2 ways that you can make this quilt. You could cut some squares and sew them all together, or you can do what I'm going to do and cut strips instead. Why, you may ask? Well, we find it to be a lot faster, as we don't have to sew lots of squares together. It's easier and it makes for more accurate piecing, so you'll get perfect seams like this. A huge plus if you are just starting out and have trouble lining things up. So I'll take the first fabric, and what I'm going to do is straighten up one of the edges so that I have a nice clean starting point to begin cutting. Now when you get your fabric from the store, it's not always cut very well, so straightening it up first is essential. Now to do this, just line up your ruler on the folded edge of the fabric and cut. Now once that's done, I'm going to flip the fabric so that it's the right angle for me to cut. Then I'll line up the ruler on the 10-inch because I want to cut some 10-inch strips from this fabric, and I'll cut 3 of them. If you don't have a big ruler like this, you can use your cutting mat to measure the fabric, but if you do a lot of quilting, I highly recommend getting one of these rulers. I find it incredibly useful. Now I'll include a link in the description field if you are interested in getting one. I have to say, I love it. Now after cutting 3 strips from the first fabric, I'll repeat the same process with the other 2 fabrics, ensuring that all the strips measure 10 inches by the width of the fabric. So I've finished cutting the fabric, and as you can see I have 3 strips of the dark coloured fabric, 3 of the light floral print and 3 of the orange fabric. Now all the detailed instructions for this project are available on the website, along with a free PDF pattern that you can download, and this will help you with laying out your fabrics. You'll find the link in the description below this video. Now we are ready to start sewing these strips together. Now for my first strip set, I'm going to take a strip of the dark fabric, a strip of the light fabric, and a strip of the orange fabric, and I'll just set these other strips aside for the moment. I'm going to take the black strip and open it out and lay it out on my mat, and then I'll take the light strip and place it next to the black strip, and then I'll take the orange strip and lay that next to the floral strip. And now I'll sew the black strip to the light strip, and then I'll sew the orange strip to the light strip. Okay, I've finished sewing the first strips together, and that completes my first strip set, and I'll just put it aside for now. Now for the next strip, I'm going to take the orange strip, a dark strip, and then a light strip, and I'll sew those together. And this completes my second strip set, and I'll set that aside as well. And for the last strip set, I'll begin with the light strip, an orange strip, and then a dark strip, and I'll sew those together. So I have the 3 strip sets completed, and I'll just flip one of these over and show you how I press them. I just gave them a really light press, or you could just finger press them. You don't want to go too crazy here because we will be pressing the seams in opposite directions further on. Now in fact the only reason I'm pressing them at all is so that they sit a little flatter when I subcut them in the next step. The next thing I'm going to do is subcut each of the strip sets into 10-inch pieces. Now these pieces form the blocks for your quilt. However, before doing that, I'm going to trim off the selvage. I generally do this because the selvages have a tighter weave compared to the rest of the fabric, and it may lead to warping. Plus, I don't want to have any of the white of the selvage showing. You can see that my ruler isn't long enough, so I'm doing this in 2 steps by just moving my ruler up after the first cut. Now I'm going to turn my mat around so that it's in the right angle for me to cut, and I'll line up my ruler at the 10-inch mark, and I also like to line up one of the horizontal lines along the seam line to ensure that everything is lined up correctly, and then I'll cut. And again, you can see that I'm moving my ruler up, lining up everything nicely, and then I can complete the cut. And I'm going to continue that all the way down the strip, subcutting into 10-inch pieces, so that I will end up with 4 blocks. And now I'm going to repeat that process with the other 2 strip sets, so you just need to subcut them all into 10-inch pieces. And once that is done, I now have 12 blocks in total, and we can go on to the next step, which is the fun part, laying out your quilt blocks. So here we are at the design board, and I'm going to lay out the blocks like this. Now on the first row, I put 2 blocks starting with the dark fabric. And when I come down to the next row, I start with an orange block. And for the last row, I'll start with a white floral fabric. And I'll repeat this pattern until I've used up all of my blocks. Now, as you can see, it's a simple and straightforward design that not only looks lovely, it also showcases the fabric nicely. Now, while I'm making a lap quilt, this layout would be equally adorable as a baby quilt using nursery themed patterns. Once the blocks have been arranged, it's time to sew them together into rows, and because our squares have been sewn to form the blocks, we only need to sew 1 seam to join them together. And again, we're using a 1/4 inch seam. So I'll go ahead and do that with all of the blocks all the way up the quilt. And this is what it looks like after the blocks have been sewn into rows, and I'll just flip over the first few rows to show you how I've pressed the seams. So in the first row, I've pressed all the seams in this direction, and in the next row, I've pressed them in the opposite direction. And I continued all the way up the quilt, pressing in opposite directions for each row. Doing this will ensure that your seams nest perfectly when you come to sew the rows together, and this makes joining your rows together easier and more precise. And now I'm going to sew the rows together to form the quilt top. So take the bottom rows, you can work from the top if you wish. I'm going to start with the bottom because those are the rows that are nearest to me. I'm going to bring the second row down and lay it over the bottom row and line up the seams, pin them in place, and then the seams will nest nicely because of how we've pressed them previously. Now pin along the rows and sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam. And continue up the quilt. I like to sew 2 rows together and then sew the next 2 rows together before joining all the rows to form the quilt, but this is just my personal preference. And there we have it, our quilt top is finished. Now you can choose to add borders for an extra decorative touch or to add size to the quilt. And once you're happy with the top, it's time to add your backing and batting. And we'll include links in the description field below to help you with this. Or you can finish off the quilt using our easiest quilt ever turn-through method, and I'll add a link to that as well. Now if you've enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to like, comment and subscribe for more quilting projects throughout the year. And happy quilting!